All right. So today on Business for Nerds, I have a special episode about an anthology I was part of. This is actually the third part to Beyond Stories Review 3. I have done a prior review for the first stories as well as a second review, and this is the third review. And this time I'm going to be going over my story. And let me drink some coffee. So I'll also be reading some short excerpts from each story. And again, I apologize if I make any mistakes on anyone's names. So the first story I'm going to review is Whale Eater by James Kenwood. Then My Brother Shot an Angel by Grace Anderson. Death's Last Whisper by Rolando Andrade. Independent Monster Salvage by Danielle Minnaar. The Time Traveler's Kiss by Nevena Pascaleva. A Visit to the Cemetery on Christmas Day by Mercedes de Santiago. Even in Death by Kathy Enriquez. My Story, Blessings and Curses, The Legacy Beyond Space and Time by Brianna Willie and dedicated to Blake Willie. Locks and Mirrors, Horrors and Fears by Allison Riney. So the first story I will review is James Kenwood's Whale Eater. This story immerses you in an adrenaline-filled chase across the cosmos. Jericho's ship, the Apache Spirit, maneuvers in a way that reminded me of the Rocinante from The Expanse. That's one of my favorite shows. Both stories capture the crushing effects of G-forces and the life-saving injections that crews rely on to survive. But the heart of Whale Eater lies in its mystery. Is the whale simply a colony ship, or is it alive? I wasn't quite sure. It probably is. I don't know. Which recently, too, I also watched Twin Peaks. I watched all of the series, the movie, and then the final series. And it opened up my eyes to the realization that it's amazing in story writing to keep your readers, your listeners, your viewers guessing. It's super fun to do that. So I think this story does keep us guessing. We're not exactly sure, and that's great. You end up reflecting long after you finish the story. But what sets Whale Eater apart is its haunting moral ambiguity as well. The whale, with its mix of mechanical and biological traits, feels like a character in its own right, making us question whether Jericho's mission is justified or something else, or tragic. Jericho's mission to destroy the whale raises questions about morality, purpose, and the true nature of his target. The whale itself, described as part machine and part living entity, reminded me of the whimsical yet profound questions in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. What is life? What does it mean to be alive? A quote or an excerpt. The blues were waiting for them as they came out behind Phobos. The fat colony ship engines blew as it fell stern first towards them, with a pack of needle shapes swinging in loose curves around it. Vectored thrust nozzles spraying propellant, dim glitters against the red of the planet behind them. Jericho felt sweat beading across his forehead as he cranked the main motor up to maximum, felt the gravity kick on his stomach, turning into an anvil, a car, an elephant. So I think that is describing the weight of gravity. The Apache Spirit shook around him, screaming electronic codes as they closed the distance. Indigo Pearl and Mockingbird were somewhere on his right, riding wingtip to wingtip for a single radar profile. So I think this is really neat how this is written. Again, you're not exactly sure if these ships are real or if they're somehow part animal, part mechanical, or both. And I think that's really neat. Another show this reminded me of, which I forgot to put in the notes. Oh, what is that show? No. Oh, Farscape. That was it. Of course, for some reason, Surface comes up. Another of my favorite shows. But that has nothing to do with this. So onward. My Brother Shot an Angel by Grace Anderson. This is a story that is both deeply unsettling and thought provoking. At its core, this tale explores the consequences of curiosity and recklessness, blending the mundane act of hunting with the supernatural. Two young brothers left alone in the woods make a fateful decision when they find their father's rifle. What starts as an innocent attempt to prove themselves quickly spirals into something much darker. Here's an excerpt. My brother and I coveted our time spent tagging along on our father's hunting trips. We were still too young to hunt on our own, being only 10 and 13, but we rejoiced in the fact that someday we would be able to go out and bring home a big game for our family's dinner plate. One day, my father had gone into town to gather supplies, leaving my brother and me alone in our little cabin in the woods. All right, boys, he told us, stay put. Don't touch anything you're not supposed to. And I'll be sure to return with a treat for both of you. My brother and I perk at the idea of a treat, dreaming of fresh ice cream and buttercream cake. You two be good now. Our father said finally before closing the door behind him. Father was taking much longer to return from his trip to town than I was expecting. Time seemed to drag on much slower than usual. Boredom fell over us like a fresh layer of fog. I was sitting cross-legged on the floor with a deck of playing cards spread out in front of me. I always had trouble figuring out how to best use them to entertain myself. My brother approached me with a wicked grin on his face. Look, he said, pointing a grubby finger at the glass case propped up in the corner. Dad left his rifle here. Yeah, so, I replied, not bothering to lift my eyes from the cards. Of course, he wouldn't take his rifle into town. What would he use it for there? I just had an idea, my brother said, his smile growing across his face. What if we take Dad's rifle, go out in the woods, and shoot something? Later on, and I don't want to spoil the story, so don't listen to this part if you don't want to know what happens. But, the title kind of tells you. Later on, it sounds like the brother literally shot an angel. And, myself with hearing this, I always, with shows and stories, if there's a monster or whether it's good or bad, I always feel a little bad for it, like the troll on Lord of the Rings. It's just it's being a troll, and yes, it's causing harm, but they did meander into his home, so of course he's angry, and then they have to kill it. And yes, I know that it's sort of evil, but I feel a little bad for it. Now, here's an actual angel, which, is usually associated with good, and they shoot it. And I guess it just kind of bothers you a little bit. I'm also a believer, and I believe real angels are much more powerful than these types of creatures and aren't injured by physical weapons like 2 Corinthians 10 through 5 talks about. Anyway, this was a little disturbing, but that's what horror is supposed to be. So, this story is the kind of story that lingers in your mind long after you've read it. It forces us to consider the consequences of our actions, to try not to be impulsive, whether some things are simply not meant to be disturbed. It's, like I said, disturbing, tragic, and thought provoking. One of those stories that leaves you with more questions than answers, like Twin Peaks. When I think about it, I have a visceral response. So, have you read this story? What do you think the angel symbolizes? If angels are typically invincible, was this being something else entirely? What do you think about that? And what do you think the protagonist was experiencing? Feel free to leave some comments wherever you're watching this, whether this is on YouTube, Substack, or a post. Let me know what you think. On to the next story, or actually, this was a poem. Death's Last Whisper by Rolando Andrade, or Andrade. I'm not exactly sure how to say that. My apologies. This is a haunting and thought-provoking poem. This piece takes a unique approach to the concept of death, portraying it not as an impersonal force, but as a living entity, one with an ego, a sense of pride, and even an element of arrogance. But what makes this poem so intriguing is how it flips the script. Check out the poem story for more about why this is true. It's a very short poem, so I'm only going to read a tiny bit of it. Death had a dark, creeping smile and a cold touch of loneliness, and since she had a big ego, it always advertised herself with distinctive smell. So, my GPT helped me with some of the pictures for this. I've been training it to improve its picture generation. Now, yes, you can see that isn't really a clock if you look closely at it. I told my AI, you don't write text well. You don't write Roman numerals well. Anyway, I'm still training it. It's doing its best. It's helped with a lot of things. Actually, in March, Jake Anderson and I are going to be going over some things you can use your GPT to help you with in life. We're going to be talking about the paid version and how we've been using it to help with our businesses, not to create content for us necessarily, but to just kind of be assistants in our lives. So, all right, a little bit more about the poem. There's a dark and poetic tone. The language used in the poem is both eerie and poetic, painting death as an almost playful yet sinister presence. It keeps the reader engaged while delivering a profound message. There are also haunting visuals, or at least the way it's described helps us to build haunting visuals in our minds. From the smell of rotten breath to the creeping nature of death itself, the imagery lingers in the reader's mind long after finishing the poem. There's also cycles of power. One of the most fascinating aspects of this poem is its exploration of power dynamics. Just as death claims life, life may retaliate. It's a constant struggle, an eternal loop. Again, during my review of this, I was watching Twin Peaks. If you're a fan of Twin Peaks, you might see some parallels here, like Judy. Death seems like an inescapable force, but this poem suggests that nothing, not even death, is truly unstoppable. Ooh. Thought-provoking questions. Does this poem suggest that death is not as invincible as we believe? How does this poem relate to folklore and pop culture depictions of death? I'd love to know your answers. Could death's arrogance in the poem reflect how we as humans fear but also romanticize the unknown? Also, death's last whisper lingers in the mind, forcing us to reconsider the very nature of mortality, power, and the cycles that define existence. All right, another story by Danielle Minnaar. This is called Independent Monster Salvage. Imagine a world where survival doesn't just mean staying alive, it means scavenging the dead bodies of towering monsters for profit. In Independent Monster Salvage, it's a gripping post-apocalyptic thriller that blends stealth, strategy, and suspense into one incredible story. The story is set in a bleak wasteland where the monster's remains are scavenged for valuable parts. Our protagonist type person is a daring motorcyclist and risks everything by sneaking into a highly guarded salvage site where the monstrous carcasses are under control of some group. The atmosphere is kind of tense. It keeps us on the edge of our seats. The setting evokes comparisons to some games I've played, like Thief Deadly Shadows. Just kind of the ambiance of it. It made me think of it, maybe the sneaking aspects too, where slipping through the cracks of danger is the only way to survive. An excerpt: in the distance was her quarry, visible by floodlights, to try and watch out for people like her. She waited for the car to disappear behind her and turned off her lights, moving closer under the cover of darkness. A little more and she stopped by the side of the road. She would have to go the rest of the way on foot, pushing her bike along. She left it on an unremarkable stretch of desert behind some bushes. This close, she could see the floodlights weren't nearly as all-encompassing as they looked from afar, leaving large blotches of darkness between them, and that part reminded me of Thief. There was, after all, a lot of ground to cover if they wanted to surround a dead kaiju. It had died earlier that day. She saw it get cut to pieces on the news, but it was something else to be here in person. It was just so big. She could comfortably hide in the groove in the ground, left in the fight, no doubt. From her hiding spot, she surveyed the area. In front of her was the largest pool of light surrounding what remains of the torso that would have the most valuable salvage, but it looked to have the best coverage. Off to the side was something smaller, an arm maybe. It wouldn't be as valuable, but the crows hadn't put nearly as much effort into closing this off as the torso. The legs must have landed somewhere else, but she couldn't make out where that was. Calculated risk, she said, and crawled her way to the arm. Nose to the ground, she hoped that if a guard looked her way, they would just assume her to be a bush. It was slow going. Would they really be paying that much attention out here? After all, who is crazy enough to be doing something like this? What makes this story so gripping is its suspense. Every step the protagonist takes is filled with tension. She's crawling, hiding, and hoping the guards don't spot her. Kauju's green blood adds a sense of mystery. What exactly are these creatures, and why are their remains so valuable? The story, in my mind, is a blend of Fallout's Wasteland and the industrial dystopia of Pacific Rim. It keeps you on edge, wondering what happens if she gets caught. Also, what dark secrets lie in the bodies of these monsters. And most importantly, who else is watching in the darkness? Independent Monster Salvage isn't just a story, it's a cinematic experience in writing form. It makes you want to step into its world, take the risk, and uncover its mysteries. And that is the mark of a fantastic piece of sci-fi. The Time Traveler's Kiss by Nevena Pascaleva. Imagine having the power to go back in time, not to change history, but just to witness a moment that meant everything to you. The Time Traveler's Kiss by Nevena Pascaleva explores this heartbreaking possibility through the story of a mother and a son who are both time enforcers, and they're tasked with a seemingly routine mission. But for them, this journey is deeply personal. Their time travel device, the chronosphere, allows them to navigate time, but strict rules govern its use. Their mission's clear: retrieve a stolen painting from the past. But as their journey brings them near the home they once shared with the mother's late husband, and who is also the father of her son, emotions take over. The mother tells herself she doesn't want to see him, yet deep down she aches for one last glimpse. The son, craving connection, takes a risk. He sees his mother in the past. Has the timeline been altered? Here's an excerpt. I'm the head of temporal surveillance and enforcement, and my son is a trainee. He's under my command on this mission. While he put on the clothes that will align with the time sector we'll be visiting, I glance at him. He's pale as usual. He looks a lot like me, and as the years go by, the similarity deepens. I wish he had more of his father in him. Then every time he looked in the mirror, he wouldn't feel compelled to call me, visit, or decline the next romantic date because there's nobody like Mom. He fumbles with the shirt's buttons, and I see his hand trembling. Look, I say, thinking that the checkered cotton fabric of his shirt reminds me of Springfield's viewed from a plane window. Underneath, he's wearing a plain white t-shirt. There's nothing special about that house. You've seen it in videos and photos many times. I want to see it in reality. Unlike his hand, his voice is surprisingly firm. I raise an eyebrow and then suddenly realize that the upcoming event is not simply a mission for me either. I'm not just going to return a painting stolen by an Arab plunderer. I'm going back to a time when I wasn't working but staying at home to look after my baby boy, and my husband was the one who led the TSE department. We both graduated from Temporal Operations University, but after a short period of field work, I had decided to dedicate my time to my family. We wanted many kids, not just one. We wanted to spend a lifetime together. I blinked back a tear. You're hoping. I step up and straighten his collar. You're hoping to see Dad. So the story is more than just a time travel adventure. It's about love, loss, and the impossible choices we'd make if we could reach into the past. The emotional weight of the story reminds us that even if we had the power to time travel, the hardest thing might be resisting the urge to use it for our hearts instead of our missions. If given the chance, would you risk everything for one last moment with someone you lost? So the time traveler's kiss leaves us with a poignant question. Does love transcend, not transist? Does love transcend time, or does time force us to move on? A powerful, beautifully written story that lingers long after the final page. I wonder if I need to turn on my light. Hold on. Okay, so now I have some light. Are you interested in starting and building your therapy private practice, or growing beyond a therapy private practice and diversifying your income? My courses on starting a therapy private practice and diversifying income are 50% off for paid subscribers to my blog. Check out my post called Paid Subscriber Benefits on Substack at drbriannawilly.substack.com. Yeah, it's not a visit. This should read a visit to the cemetery on Christmas Day. My apologies for the. What if your quiet Christmas Day visit to a cemetery turned into a supernatural battle for survival? A Visit to the Cemetery on Christmas Day by Mercedes de Santiago takes the idea of grief and remembrance and mixes it with eerie horror elements, delivering a spine-tingling tale of mystery and survival. Alice begins her visit feeling unsettled, but she brushes it off until the eerie silence takes over. Something happens that throws Alice off, and she is left wondering what really happened. And let me find a quote. It was Christmas Day again, as Alice walked along the path leading to the entrance of the village cemetery where her parents were laid to rest. She thought of the events that had taken place over the past year. Her father, a widower for over 30 years, had died at the ripe old age of 98, exactly 1 year ago. Still, it was so revolting that both her brother and sister would not have liked the idea of accompanying her to visit their parents' grave on such a special day. When she reached the cemetery gate, she was shocked to see how dark the sky was over the small but leafy cemetery, filled with beautiful sculptures that made it an open-air memorial. The art there seemed more intended for the living than the dead, but as his late father said, it was usually the dead who commissioned these stone figures while they were still alive. The story expertly blends the quiet sadness of visiting a grave with an unexpected moment of horror. It taps into classic supernatural themes, reminding me of episodes like Jump the Shark from Supernatural, where ghouls prowl cemeteries and prey on the living, much like Sam and Dean Winchester arriving just in time to stop the monsters. Alice's mysterious protector shows up at the last moment. But who is this guardian of the cemetery, and what secrets does this place hold? A Visit to the Cemetery on Christmas Day is more than just a ghost story. It's a haunting blend of memory, grief, and the mysteries that lurk beneath the surface of our reality. It leaves us wondering, was it real or just a trick of the mind? So another story by Kathy Enriquez called Even in Death. Actually, I'm currently working on an episode that I recorded with Kathy. I think it was, about a month or so ago, maybe less than that. And we nerd out in that episode, and we talk about her writing, her art, and interests. So that's going to be a good episode. We're going to her story. What if someone you once knew, someone full of life, showed up at your door looking as if their very essence had been drained from them? Even in Death by Kathy Enriquez is a story that blends psychological horror with supernatural terror, revealing the slow destruction of a person under the grip of a sinister force. The story opens up with a tense moment, a late night knock, the rain pouring down, and Nikki's long lost friend, Robin, standing before her barely alive. As Nikki tries to understand what's happening, we learn that something or someone has been impacting her, is what we'll say. Let me read an excerpt. The rain was pouring outside. Lightning lit up the night sky, accompanied by thunder rumbling. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Nikki, who was enjoying some late night reading on her couch, jumped out of her seat, startled. She looked up. The clock on the wall read 11:44 p.m. Just sidebar. I would totally not be opening my door at 11:44 p.m., especially if I was alone. Just saying. Who the hell would show up at this hour, she thought. She hesitated to go to the door when whoever was on the other side knocked loudly, causing her to jump again. She quickly grabbed a fire poker and went to the door. I would definitely be grabbing some sort of weapon. I don't have any weapons in the house, but just to defend myself if needed. Okay. She went to the door. She took a deep breath and then opened it. The sight before made her blood freeze. A skeletal figure stood trembling on her porch, her clothes drenched from the rain. Nikki gripped the poker harder, ready to use it. She thought it was some sort of Halloween prank, except it was late November. Once she was past being shocked, Nikki asked, "Who the hell are you?" She revealed the poker in her hand. "Quick, answer, or I won't be afraid to use this." The figure staggered toward the light emanating from the house, revealing her sunken face. "Nikki, it's me," the voice rasped. Weak, desperate. "I need your help." Nikki instantly recognized the voice. "Robin?" Her voice cracked as her old friend collapsed onto the threshold. Nikki dropped the fire poker and instinctively caught her, slightly gagging as her fingers brushed over, thin, papery skin stretched tightly over bone. "Christ, you look like shit," Nikki exclaimed. "What the hell happened to you?" She dragged Robin inside, then closed the door behind her. Robin's head lolled weakly, her hoodie falling back to reveal the full extent of her condition. Nikki couldn't help but recoil a bit. The Robin she knew was beautiful. To the horror of her friend, she used to have joked that Robin looked like Anya Taylor-Joy, except with raven black hair. The Robin standing before her had gaunt cheeks, cracked lips, hollow eyes, and her skin was almost gray. Nikki guided Robin to the couch. As she did, she realized how light Robin was, and she felt a bit of sadness well up in her. How in the world did she get like this, Nikki thought. "You're staying here. I'm calling an ambulance," Nikki said, reaching for her phone. As Robin struggles for her life, here's my commentary. Freddy's rage grows. He doesn't just haunt her. He appears to act like he owns her. The story's horror isn't just supernatural, it's emotional. It echoes the real-world cycles of abuse, control, and the way trauma can consume people. Freddy may be a literal shadow, but his presence feels terrifyingly human. The ending leaves us wondering, was Freddy a ghost, or was he something far worse? Even in death, it's more than just a ghost story. It may be a chilling allegory for toxic relationships and the way they consume even the strongest of us. Nope, now we're on to mine. All right, so I will say, because I didn't really have anyone to review this, I asked my GPT to review it and kind of give me some pointers on what to say here. So I'm just going to kind of read you what it said. Anyway, I'm a little nervous here. Okay. This is my first short story. Well, I guess it's my second because in middle school I wrote a story. Anyway, so it's called Blessings and Curses, The Legacy Beyond Space and Time. It's by me and it's dedicated to my husband, Blake Willie. I did want to say, too, that this story was sparked from a conversation he and I were having about, I forget the name of the movie. We were talking about maybe writing something that involved time and there being pieces within possibly a space that might open portals to other places. So I don't even remember the whole conversation, but this story was kind of birthed from that. And okay, so I'm just going to go into it. What if time wasn't linear? What if the choices of the past and future intertwined in ways we couldn't predict? Blessings and Curses, The Legacy Beyond Space and Time by Brianna Willey takes us on a deeply personal journey where faith, fate, and free will collide. In this story, we follow a protagonist caught between blessings and curses, navigating a reality where time is not fixed and their decisions hold incredible weight. The protagonist, Bridget, must decide whether to embrace their fate or forge a new path. The story, it said beautifully, explores the tension between destiny and free will. Throughout the narrative, the echoes of past decisions loom over the present, asking, can we truly escape the legacies we inherit? And here's an excerpt. They later found that behind the wall was a hidden room. In this room, she discovered many old things and antiques, a music box that was still working, and some old pictures and letters. Among the antiques, there were old clocks, a brass telescope, and a collection of ornate quills and inkwells. A large, dusty globe sat on a pedestal, its surface marked with the routes of long-forgotten voyages. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and polished wood. As a history buff, she was especially intrigued by the letters and wondered what might be written in them. One night, as she was lying in bed in the house, staring at the ceiling and the waning light, she could not get her mind off of those letters and decided she must look into them further. She traveled up the creaky staircase and pulled the lever which opened the panel to the hidden room. She picked up one letter that was titled Invention Side Effects, which said, I had a restless night again. I felt I was battling some force in the heavenlies or something evil. I saw a young woman with striking long brown curls who was dressed in men's attire getting into an odd motorized carriage of some kind, like a horse carriage but with a motor. It was a royal blue color, shiny and metallic. It looked like something Thomas might dream up. I saw some sort of smoke too, or clouds that were different colors swirling around the carriage. One was a gray, smoky color, and the other was a greenish-blue color. I'm not sure of the meaning of these colors, but I know it means something. I woke up before I could determine what else was going on. Bridget wondered to herself when this was written. It was signed Adelaide W. She made a mental note to ask her mother about who Adelaide might be. She looked at the other contents in the intricately carved wooden box and saw pictures of a handsome couple with a little boy. The picture looked like it was from maybe the late 1800s based on the aging effects to the photograph and the couple's attire. So that's that for the excerpt. Next slide. As the story unfolds, the protagonist faces a pivotal question. Are we bound by fate, or do we have the power to shape our destiny? They must confront their past and decide whether to repeat its mistakes or rise above them. Moments of divine intervention hint at the power of faith and the possibility of redemption. And the story reminds us that blessings and curses often walk hand in hand, and true strength comes from embracing them both. In this story, it said it was a powerful exploration of destiny, faith, and the choices that define us. It challenges us to consider whether our past dictates our future, or if with courage and faith, we can carve out our own path. Ultimately, it's a story about breaking cycles, finding redemption, and trusting in something greater than ourselves. If you love stories that blend mystery with eerie atmospheric storytelling, this one's for you. And perhaps just like Twin Peaks, there's still more to uncover. My GPT did ask me, and my father-in-law asked, could there be a sequel? Maybe. I'm thinking about it. We'll see. And last, but certainly not least, Locks and Mirrors, Horrors and Fears by Allison Riney. What if your greatest fears and traumas weren't just emotions, but real tangible beings watching, waiting, tormenting you in an endless prison of self-doubt? Locks and Mirrors, Horrors and Fears by Allison Riney takes us into the depths of a psychological nightmare, where the monsters appear to be more than just metaphors. They may be manifestations of inner struggles. The protagonist appears to be trapped in a mirrored prison surrounded by reflections of their own past and judgment. And I wasn't sure, but it looked like there were about 4 symbolic figures. There may have been a dragon that may represent shame and that type of thing, and maybe some self-doubt. A shape-shifting shadow as well that may have been representative of past abuse or control. A demon that feeds off of suffering, that stretches out pain beyond limits, and a queen judge that is silently condemning. An excerpt. A drafty night, or perhaps a dreary day. One can never quite tell from the depths. Following the trace of teasing sunlight, the winds whipping the prison still bellow with resounding pain. 3 shiny mirrors form 3 cell walls. The 4th, solid with bricks, formed from doom and cement, bears a foreboding presence, echoing the drip-drop of innocence tears seeping through delicate cracks. The fabled window just beyond one's reach was only a hole supported by rebar, crumbling but determined not to fall. Bones lay crushed across the first floor, mixed amongst the ashes. The accompanying crime, leading to such damnation, faded from memory long ago. Only the pain remained seared into one's brain. Sentence length, indeterminate. Conditions of confinement subject to change, but the guilt, absolute, undeniable. Damningly reflecting and rebounding from mirror to mirror. Guarded one sits, surrounded by monsters, born of imaginative darkness, legendary, fierce, unrelenting. The fiery glow of a bloody crimson beast, the oldest guard of them all, harangued lava and hellfire, occasionally slowing to sputtering toxic, paralyzing fumes seared with the power of the shames. Outside the prison walls, the beast stalks, lingering and glowing below the window's view, cowering in the shadows, heaving tiresomely. Beyond a sharply barbed fence looms the shadow of the second guard. ... What happens when the prison itself begins to crumble? In a moment of defiance, the queen's own power turns against the prison. The daggers she once wielded to wound now shatters the mirrored walls. The monsters, once overwhelming and inescapable, begin to fall. The dragon, once fueled by fear and shame, consumes itself. The shadow which thrived on past pain fades into nothingness. The demon, relentless in its torment, rots away, leaving only echoes of its cruelty. Yet even in freedom, there is a cost. The protagonist stands among the ruins, free at last, but haunted by the past. Is true freedom ever possible, or do we always carry remnants of what once held us captive? Breaking free from the prisons of fear and trauma feels like an endless battle, but as a believer, I know that true freedom is not just about shattering mirrors or fighting back against inner demons. It's about surrendering them and sharing them with the Lord. One of my favorite scriptures is Psalm 55:22, that I cast this burden on the Lord, releasing the weight of it, and He sustains me. He doesn't just break chains, He forgives, helps us heal from the past, redeems the brokenness, and brings a new kind of peace. Locks and Mirrors, Horrors and Fears is more than a horror story. It's a psychological battle of self-liberation. It reminds us that the biggest prisons aren't always physical. Sometimes the walls we need to shatter are the ones we built inside ourselves. For real freedom, the kind that lasts comes not from fighting alone, but from surrendering our pain and trusting in something greater. That's where true healing begins. So that was a review of Beyond Stories. The part 3, that is the rest of the stories. If you'd like to check out the other stories, including Alexander Semenyuk's stories, which he has 2, He was the one that helped us. He published the book and invited us all to participate. And he is such a giving person. He is also extremely talented. And I have an episode I'm going to be working on with him as well. And that was such a fun episode where we nerded out about Twin Peaks and his book. It Comes in the Dust, and the parallels between them. It was so fun. So I will be working on that and all the other episodes I I am behind on. I wanted to also invite you to join one of our communities. I am on Facebook. I have a community on there called the Business for Nerds community. And I also have a community on Substack in the chat where you can ask us all kinds of questions about business or creativity or GPTs or Canva or whatever you want. Or if you want to chat about, your favorite game, just drop it in there. We're also on Telegram. I am on Discord as well, but that's I'm still building those things. But feel free to join one. The Facebook group is getting bigger. Okay, we also have workshops. Many of them are free. You can also follow me on Substack. Most of my content's free, but there is some paywall things like the workshop replays and that type of thing. So, okay. Also, here are some of my references. I forgot Farscape. Oh, and this actual book. I'll have to put that on my Substack. Yeah, I really enjoyed everyone's stories. If you want to check out my first story, you can purchase our book on Amazon. I'm going to drop my affiliate link for that. And if you use that link, you're supporting a small business and at no cost to you. So I'll drop that in the show notes. And thank you again for listening, and stay tuned in for more fun episodes and nerding out with other business owners and authors. And I'll see you later. Thank you. Bye.